I recently beat all the main games of Kingdom Hearts again since it had been over 10 years for me and I'd never actually played 3 despite how much I love the series. One thing that Kingdom Hearts is fairly underrated on is the difficulty of their bosses. No, not their regular bosses, but their super bosses. And since I went out of my way to do all of them, I might as well rank them. I'm combining 1 and 2 here since 1 barely has any, so a dedicated video to it would be way too short. 3 will have its own video though. Let's go on with the list. Phantom isn't hard at all. The better word to describe Phantom is annoying, since his gimmick relies on stopping the giant clock tower, then using the right magic option, or striking it depending on what color the orb is below its cloak. If you have plenty of MP and MP focused keyblades, or, just have Ultima, and Ether/Elixirs, then Phantom is easy, just tedious. Kurt Zisa isn't hard at all either. He has a gimmick where he shuts down your physical attacks, but with plenty of MP and MP restoring items, or even summoning Bambi, it shouldn't be too hard. I did die to Kurt once, but that was from my own mistake rather than the difficulty of the boss itself. Kurt isn't too much harder than Phantom, but the difference in difficulty between the two are fairly negligible. Ice Titan's the last of the fairly easy bosses amongst the super bosses, another gimmick boss. You have to deflect the icicles over and over until he's staggered, and then you relentlessly attack. You have to glide around as well as dodge his AoE ice attacks, but once you figure out the pattern, it's a fairly easy fight. Now we'll start getting to bosses that actually pose a challenge, and starting off is Unknown. Unknown is a little tricky with his ethereal balls and all the lasers, but you'll find his openings through all these attacks. You could also just abuse Strike Raid because invincibility frames are nice, especially if they come with free damage. Zexion comes next, and the toughest part about him is when he first absorbs you into his book with a million different book clones flying around. Finding the right book is a little tedious, and he can do a thing where he locks your command menu and you have to find the right word to turn it back into your normal command menu. His other gimmick is when you have to go to the blue light to avoid bombs being dropped on you, but if you can react fast enough, you can pretty easily dodge one to the right spot. Other than that, Zexion is fairly easy. Arlucia is pretty low for me. If you're max level like you're recommended to be on critical runs, then his hit counter is pretty much a non-factor. And he can give prompts to return some of it back anyways. The fight is a lot of dodging and deflecting to force openings. Once you get his rhythm down, he is fairly easy to beat. Luxord is probably the most gimmick of the gimmick bosses. He can get pretty annoying with the games, but other than the reaction time game you can combo Luxord fairly easily. Messing up the game can be pretty detrimental, but you can get out of it if you can hit Luxord several times in your dice form. His DM is really easy to avoid until the very end where he forces a minigame with your command menu. Getting 3 out of 4 is really easy, but the last one goes fairly quickly, and a lot of the time I just say it's a 50-50. If you get the 50-50 though, you win the fight. Axel is pretty tough for the sole reason of the lava floor that is constantly taking damage on you. Once you figure out how to defend against Axel using either a Reflegger or just regular deflects to open him up, the lava floor becomes a non-threat due to the damage and survivability you can do and have. I even use Limit Form in cases where I need to cure to get in free damage on Axel. Xigbar is pretty easy. This is a very deflect or reflect heavy fight, and I would have beaten him the first couple of times I fought him if not for my own mistakes. The only real tricky part is his DM, but learning how to dodge it is very intuitive for me, and I didn't really get caught by it. Saïx is a little tricky with his Berserk Reaper, but knocking him out of his attacks with his own weapon is the trick to this fight. Surviving some of his combos is pretty difficult since he delays some of his hits so that it gets through once more. Getting into the pattern of dodging and making openings with his weapon against him should secure you a win against Saïx. Lexaeus is honestly pretty close to Saïx, and they can probably swap spots on how I'm feeling. Lexaeus is all dodging and Reflega to get the reaction command to stagger Lexaeus and getting in a lot of damage on him. The power level changes how large the AoE of his moveset becomes, but the strategy of dodging and reflect spamming doesn't change. With a few cycles of that, Lexaeus should be taken out. Vexen gave me a lot of trouble when I thought he was going to be a pushover. The usage of Final Form makes this fight significantly easier, but even then his ice attacks, freezing you, as well as anti-sword being able to interrupt at any given time makes the fight really obnoxious to deal with. Vexen's shield being what is required to break before being able to combo him is also a bit annoying, especially with so many things he has on him that can prevent you from attacking him. Demyx is also one that I didn't expect to give me so much trouble, but most of the losses from him came from "Dance, Water, Dance!" which is slightly different from his actual fight within the story of the game. Hitting the water clones doesn't prompt the reaction command. You instead have to use Blizzaga to prompt it, or use Faraga to destroy the water clones directly. I did die to his attacks once, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how. Once you figure out the water clones, finding openings on Demyx is pretty easy, but his last phase with the water clones has you destroying 99 clones in the same short time window. Final Form makes that section doable through the spamming of Faraga over and over again. Larxene is next, and she is genuinely pretty tough. Honestly, she would probably be a little higher if not for me getting a little lucky in my fight against her, as well as being fairly decent in fighting bosses that are more glass cannons like Larxene or even Roxas later down the list. I'm a lot worse against bosses that force me to play a slower type fight and punish me for being too aggressive, which Larxene isn't. Using drive forms to replenish your MP throughout the fight is pretty important, as well as using items like ethers or elixirs to keep yourself alive. Xemnas is just out of the top 5 here. His first phase is fairly easy, it's pretty similar to the one you have him with in the main story. As for his second phase, it's a bit trickier due to how much longer it lasts compared to the original fight. The real difficult part is if you get caught by Xemnas and forced to play as Riku when Sora is really low, making the fight basically impossible to win depending on the health you were on with Sora. So I couldn't really decide whether or not which Sephiroth I thought was more difficult after recent replays of the 2 fights in both games. Kingdom Hearts 1 Sephiroth took me less attempts, but comparatively in difficulty he is pretty difficult for the mechanics available for Kingdom Hearts 1. Abusing strike rate as well as having very small attack windows make the fight tedious. And Heartless Angel is a lot harder and more punishing in Kingdom Hearts 1 than in 2. As for the strong points of Kingdom Hearts 2, there's the reaction command he prompts at the very beginning of the fight, and one he repeats throughout the fight. It's not difficult to react to, but definitely adds a layer to the fight where he can throw this out right after an attack. In general, his combos are longer but easier to recover from. The extra movement Sora has here definitely makes the fight easier in terms of getting Sephiroth out of Heartless Angel, but that is under the premise that the player has leveled up their movement options from different drive forms. Overall, they're pretty even in my eyes. Roxas makes it here again with fewer attempts than some of the other bosses I've listed before, but again I think that's entirely because of what kind of boss Roxas is. A more glass cannon type boss that I can interrupt and do loads of damage to, as well as using something like Limit Form to eat through his attacks and get free damage. Mechanically, he is pretty tricky since he can revenge hit you only after one combo, he's very fast, and he can throw off some timings by delaying an attack. Xaldin being this high actually surprised me, and he's only really this high because he kind of cheats in this fight. The entire gimmick of this fight is to farm his jump commands to open him up, but he is legitimately unpredictable. Sometimes the jump command doesn't even phase him, sometimes it does. Sometimes I can combo him off the jump command and sometimes I can't. It was genuinely frustrating seeing how inconsistent this fight is and his main mechanic were. There was really no doubt who was going to be at the top of the list. Lingering Will was by far the hardest boss in the entire franchise until Yozora so easily took his crown in Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC. Lingering Will is a fight of survival and taking any damage you can take before going into defense mode again. Knowing his attacks is important here, and they can still trip you up even when you know exactly what is coming. The worst move to get hit by is the one that can lock you out of your magic or your physical strikes, especially if he catches you with another attack like the one that locks your command menu. His DM being able to chain into itself is also insane. Having to survive a DM and getting a combo off, then seeing Lingering Will queue up another one is harrowing. Overall, Lingering is insane. Hello, RJ from the future here. I just realized editing this video that I didn't even reach 10 minutes for the ranking. I definitely talked a little too fast and didn't add enough to what I want to talk about with the bosses, but if I were to redo the whole thing it would take far too long, so I'm just going to go on a little bit of a yap session about Lingering Will and or Sephiroth. Going in, I didn't really think that I was going to be able to beat Sephiroth and Lingering Will as quickly as I did, because obviously when I was younger and a lot worse at games, obviously clouding my my own judgment for how good I am now and my ability to beat these bosses. But when, obviously when I'm younger, or when we're all younger, when we played these games, we were so much worse, and Sephiroth consistently beat my shit in, as well as Lingering Will. But I think Sephiroth only took me like 5 tries. Maybe less. I think it might have been 4. I wasn't keeping track for Kingdom Hearts 1 specifically because I knew their super bosses weren't that hard, so I didn't really keep track. But yeah, Sephiroth only took like 5 tries, and that's why I'm really conflicted on whether or not it's genuinely more difficult than the Kingdom Hearts Sephiroth for Kingdom Hearts 2. But Kingdom Hearts 1 Sephiroth, I was at like level 80 something. Kingdom Hearts 2 I wasn't. So I guess that could be a differentiator. But I don't know. I mean, ultimately I think, like I said in the ranking, they're about the same. But Lingering Will I thought would take so much longer. For the longest time I thought Lingering Will was probably the hardest boss I had ever fought, ever, in any video game. And I kept that opinion up to when I beat Elden Ring, even fighting Melania and all that. In my head, Lingering Will was like, yeah, he is the insurmountable #1 spot in my head for like top boss, top most difficult. Even though, you know, Melania took me over 100 tries. I don't know if she took me to 200. She might have taken me 200. I don't even remember. I think it was like 150-ish, around there. The Lingering Will only took me like 26, something like that. I don't know the exact numbers right now, and I don't feel like checking. But that definitely changed my opinion on Lingering Will a bit. I still reserve that he is one of the hardest bosses I've ever fought. Maybe not the hardest. I think the hardest is now reserved for a different boss in the Kingdom Hearts franchise, which obviously, like I said, we'll get into when I make the Kingdom Hearts 3 ranking video. But that is my yap. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Sorry for the lack of posts. I really need to upload way more and definitely will try to. Thank you for watching. Sending a like and sub my way would truly help out. Expect the Kingdom Hearts 3 ranking to come out soon.